I knew it was you, Fredo.
In the Godfather movies, a lot happens off-screen, letting the audience fill in the gaps. This is why, 50 years later, the first and second film are still widely discussed and debated. In this video, we're taking a look at some of the biggest questions we're still asking. Let's get into it. Why did Fabrizio betray Michael in Sicily? When Michael is hiding out in Sicily, Fabrizio is one of his closest associates. For this reason, it comes as somewhat of a surprise when he betrays Michael. Although it is not made explicit in the film, Fabrizio had secretly been working with Michael's enemies and had agreed to help them assassinate him. Michael survives the assassination attempt, but his new wife, Apollonia, and their unborn child are killed in the car bomb intended for him.
No!
There isn't anything in the film to directly imply what Fabrizio's motivations are. There is, however, a big clue in a deleted scene. In this scene in the final act of The Godfather, Michael pays a very special visit to Fabrizio, and it is revealed that he owns a pizzeria in New York. From this, we can assume that Fabrizio betrayed Michael for two things: first, safe passage to America, and second, enough money to start a business, the pizzeria. Because this scene was cut though, Fabrizio is never seen again in The Godfather. This is just one of many scenes that was left on the cutting room floor. But hey, what about vengeance for Apollonia? Why didn't Michael take revenge on Fabrizio for killing Apollonia? Well, in that deleted scene we just mentioned, Michael personally takes his revenge for the murder of Apollonia. In the gory scene, Michael doesn't just visit Fabrizio in his pizzeria, he murders him with a shotgun. However, the scene was so violent and so bloody that it had to be cut. Still, Coppola didn't want Fabrizio to get away with betraying Michael and murdering Apollonia scot-free, so for The Godfather Part 2 another Fabrizio death scene was shot. In this scene, Michael's men locate Fabrizio and fittingly kill him with a car bomb. Again though, the scene was cut, meaning that Fabrizio's death was not portrayed in the films. It is, however, probably safe to assume that Michael did take revenge for Apollonia and kill Fabrizio off-screen.
Fabrizio.
How did Michael know Carlo was a traitor? Carlo's betrayal of the Corleone family is extremely multifaceted. Carlo violently beats Connie, knowingly setting in motion Sonny's murder, which in turn sets in motion a chain of events that brings the Corleone family to their knees. Sonny's murder forces Vito from his sickbed to take over the family business while he is still weak. Emboldened by this, Barzini attempts a hit on Michael in Sicily through Fabrizio. As a result of the attempted hit on Michael, Vito is forced to vow that no vengeance will be taken for Sonny's murder, thus ensuring Michael's safe return to New York. This weakens the Corleone's position while simultaneously strengthening Barzini's and the other families. In other words, Carlo's betrayal is the catalyst for the Corleones losing the war. But how did Michael know that it was Carlo that set up Sonny and betrayed the family? Well, in the book, the connection between Carlo's actions and Sonny's murder are made explicit. Tom Hagen actually comforts Carlo, telling him that no one is going to blame him for his fight with Connie resulting in Sonny's death. This reassurance could be seen as an effort by Tom to de-escalate the spiraling war. Tom knew that if Carlo was held responsible, there would be retribution and more violence. Even though this is omitted from the film, we can assume that Tom and Vito knew that Carlo had set Sonny up, but they were sitting on it. When Michael became the head of the family, he would have been debriefed by Tom about Carlo's betrayal. Of course, that is if Michael hadn't already come to the logical conclusion himself.
Don't tell me you're innocent. Because it insults my intelligence.
Hello, Carlo.
How did Vito know it was Barzini all along? Following Sonny's murder and the attempted assassination of Michael, Vito is forced to call a meeting of the five families to negotiate a truce. After this meeting, Vito tells Tom that he knows it's Barzini who's behind the attacks on the family. Vito had known for some time that Tattaglia was a traitor, but he makes it clear that he did not think Tattaglia was capable of attacking the Corleones alone.
The Don is a pimp. He never could have outfought Santino.
In other words, Vito had little respect for Tattaglia's abilities as a wartime Don. He knew someone else, someone more competent, was behind the attacks, and it was at the meeting of the five families where he figured out who it was. Although it's not explicitly stated, there are a number of ways Vito could have made this deduction. The first is that, in the meeting, there is one distinct, lead negotiator, one person who clearly has a vested interest in the negotiations, and that was Don Barzini. In fact, the other families seemed to have little interest in the negotiations by comparison to him. It could be deduced from this that Barzini had the most to gain from the meeting. He was the one that needed Vito's connections in order to continue the drug trafficking operation. The second clue is that, during the meeting, Barzini tells Vito,
"A refusal is not the act of a friend."
In other words, if you refuse to share your connections, you will be considered an enemy. This could be seen as an ultimatum, or even a threat. You don't threaten Don Corleone. This is how, when Vito came out of the meeting, he had seen and heard everything he needed to deduce that it was Barzini all along. What really happened to Clemenza? Peter Clemenza is one of the most memorable characters from the original Godfather film. He features in several key scenes and has one of the most quoted lines from the entire series.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
He is portrayed as a mentor to Michael as he rises through the ranks of the criminal underworld, and it's obvious that his loyalty to the Corleone family is unwavering. So, it comes as a surprise when we learn that he has died unceremoniously between the events of the first and second film. There are just 2 lines of dialogue in The Godfather Part 2 that hint at Clemenza's fate.
We were all upset about that, Frankie. Heart attack, huh?
No, there was no heart attack.
Heart attack? That was no heart attack. This implies that his cause of death is contentious, and as such there are several fan theories speculating on it. In one of these theories, Clemenza died of a drug overdose. However, there is little concrete evidence to support this theory. It is largely based on Frank touching his arm in what some have perceived as sign for a heroin overdose. But it is much more widely accepted that Frank is touching a black armband to show that he is in mourning for Clemenza. In another, more widely accepted theory, Clemenza did not die of a heart attack, but rather under suspicious circumstances involving the Rosato brothers. The Rosato brothers were set to benefit from Clemenza's death, as they had been promised certain territories when he died. This is perhaps the most plausible theory.
Clemenza promised the Rosato brothers 3 territories in the Bronx after he died.
Of course, the real reason Clemenza was not in The Godfather Part 2 was because Richard Castellano made excessive creative demands and financial demands, and was therefore written out of the script. We cover this in more detail in another video. I'll leave a link to that video at the end. How and why did Fredo betray the family? In Havana, an intoxicated Fredo accidentally reveals that he met Johnny Ola earlier that year, despite previously pretending to never have met him before. In this moment, it becomes apparent to Michael that Fredo is the family traitor.
You broke my heart.
Fredo insists that he didn't know there would be an attempted hit on Michael. In fact, early versions of the script suggest that Fredo thought it would be a kidnapping, but this is not included in the final cut. It's never specified exactly what information Fredo provided to Johnny Ola. We can only speculate, but it is likely that he gave him financial information about the Corleone family businesses, along with information on Michael's whereabouts and movements, including detailed information about the Corleone family compound. After all, how did the gunman access the compound and know the drapes would be open?
In my bedroom where my wife sleeps!
It's never explicitly stated why Fredo betrayed his brother. As Michael's older brother, Fredo was overlooked and never had a meaningful role in the family's activities. It was implied that he did it to get something for himself on his own, which probably refers to some sort of financial compensation. But it's certainly plausible that Fredo wanted something much more valuable. With Michael dead, Fredo would get his opportunity as the new Don of the family. Perhaps Fredo was more ruthless than we think. How did Michael know it was Hyman Roth all along? When Fredo drunkenly reveals himself to be the traitor by meeting with Johnny Ola, he also confirms that it was Roth who ordered the hit on Michael. Because Ola was Roth's right-hand man, it had to be Roth. But even before Fredo confirms Michael's suspicions, he had already deduced that it was Roth based on several clues. First, Michael knew the murder of Mo Green had hurt Roth personally. They were close friends. Even though Roth tries to assure Michael he would not avenge Mo for the sake of the business, Michael expected retaliation.
This is the business we've chosen.
Second, it is revealed at the start of the film that Michael was making moves to take over a number of Roth's businesses, namely hotels. Johnny Ola makes it known to Michael that Roth would not stand in his way, but Michael knew this was likely a ploy. Ultimately, Roth appeased Michael too much in his attempts to get close to him, and Michael saw what he was doing. Roth is practicing the same principle as Michael: keep your friends close but your enemies closer. And that's how Michael figured out it was Roth all along. That's all for this video. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.